Hello my friends, and welcome to a very special guide on difficulty settings and challenge runs. So as many of you know, I work for Slytherin as a community moderator, and one of the questions that I see a lot, and one of the answers that people give a lot to the same question is, how do I make the game easier or harder? And the answer is always something along the lines of, you can customize Panzer Corps 2 to increase the challenge or decrease the challenge, and that's what you should do. But I don't think anyone has really explained in any detail how to do that. Additionally, I'm going to be covering a new feature, which will be part of a future challenge run in this video, which I actually myself designed. So we'll be talking about that towards the end. So the first thing is, what if you're just getting into these kind of games, or you want to get someone else into these kind of games, like, I don't know, your son or daughter, a friend, someone who's never played this kind of game before? How do you make Panzer Corps 2 easier to play or easier to get into? And here's the funny thing, when you start a new game, you start a new campaign, these difficulty settings don't really make the game any easier. It's a funny thing to say. You have the hardest difficulty setting increases accuracy by 20%, which increases enemy damage by 40%. So that's an obvious thing that makes it harder. And then this one adds a 10% accuracy bonus, so that's a 20% increase in enemy damage. And then the rest of these, they just adjust the economy of the game. They don't actually make the combat any easier. So if you choose an easier difficulty level, you are going to have a lot more money to play with, and maybe even a few more turns before you run out of time. But generally the time limits in the game are pretty generous. And the economic side of it can be difficult to manage if you're struggling, though. It's typically because you're losing the combats, and these difficulty settings don't adjust the combat strength at all. So, how do you fix that? If you actually want an easier game, what settings should you pick to actually get an easier game? What you actually need to do is, and everything exciting is in this advanced options panel. What you need to really do is go to Commander Trait Points and set either 5 or 7. I'm going to talk about why it's either these two in a minute. So we'll go with 7. 7 or 5. Then close this panel. Start your game. Choose wherever you want to play. And I'm just going to cover. There are some traits in the actual start of the game that will make the combat a lot easier, and so we're giving you extra points so you can select those things, and just explaining why you would pick them, or my philosophy behind choosing them. So on this panel, you can choose your buffs and your debuffs. This is sort of part of the setup of the game. So these are all positive things and they cost points, and these are all negative things and they give points for dealing with them. Now if you want to make the game easier, or you want to ease someone into the game, don't bother with any of these negative traits. We've got 7 points, so we don't need to gain more points here, so you can just ignore all of these. And what you want to select on this side is, so the 5 points which I recommend that you spend, and then we'll talk about the last 2. Terrain Expert. So what this does is it increases base entrenchment by 1. That means most units take 10% less damage. Just flat out, they take 10% less damage. So that means you're going to take less damage, you're going to do more damage in return, and your economy is going to be less impacted by damage, and you're going to do more counterattack damage, which is going to spiral into taking less damage in the future. So this particular pick has a reasonably solid impact on reducing the difficulty. Then you want to pick Anti-Air Veteran. This makes your anti-aircraft guns incredibly lethal against aircraft. Aircraft are probably one of the biggest and most expensive or damage dealing threats in the game. And anti-air veteran will make it so that your anti-aircraft guns actually put a stop to them pretty quickly. So it's a good pick to have. It just effectively increases the power of anti-aircraft guns by like 3x. So it's definitely a nice to have. Then you also want to pick Deep Recon. This gives you a small accuracy bonus and reveals all your primary objectives. Now, the bonus is not really what you're in here for. What you're in here for is the fact that it reveals all the objective areas for you. That's just going to make it easier for you to plan your attacks on the objectives on the map. So it's a bit of extra information that actually, for a new player, is very important. It spares you having to potentially do some dangerous scouting by showing you what is in store for you across the map, and then you can work on that information without having to gather that information. And finally, Operational Initiative. So what Operational Initiative does is it gives you an initiative bonus of 4, 3, and 2 on the first couple of turns. That's not why we're taking it. We're taking it because it gives +1 initiative forever. And what that does within the game system is, when you fight an enemy, initiative determines who shoots first, and then how long it is before the other guy gets to shoot back. Now, what Operational Initiative will do is it will mean that in mirror matchups, so say your infantry versus their infantry, your tank versus their tank, where units tend to have the same initiative, it means that your units are much more likely to shoot first and deal damage to the enemy, which means less return fire for you. And that combines with Terrain Expert to dramatically reduce the amount of damage that you're taking. Okay, so why these picks? Why these 4 picks? Well, the reason is they don't change anything about how the game plays. They just make the game easier. They don't change, they don't change that you use anti-aircraft guns against aircraft. They don't change that, you attack cities with your infantry. They don't change any aspect of good play. They just mean that when you fight engagements, you're going to deal more damage and you're going to take less damage. So overall, all combats are going to be easier. And when you have a bad combat, say their tank attacks your artillery, you're going to be taking 10-20% less damage potentially from that bad combat. So that's going to save you prestige, but it's also just going to make the combat easier. So these are the 5 points that you should spend to make the game easier or to ease someone into the game. And they work on the Grand Campaign as well. If you just increase the points limit, so you can purchase these 4 things with your 5 points. Now, the reason why I said potentially add 2 more is to add Killer Team. Now, Killer Team is a very powerful pick that adds 3 heroes to your army, and generally speaking, those heroes are quite nice. Now, the reason why this is a sort of to taste pick is because depending on which heroes you get, they really alter the way that the game is played. The problem is, if you get some really good heroes and you really depend on them, they can teach you some really bad habits. And that can cause you to then, when you try and step the difficulty up, or you try and play more normal games or challenge runs or whatever, you haven't learnt how the game normally plays without a particular advantage. Say you get, on Killer Team, say you get Rapid Fire 2x, which is something that allows a unit to attack twice as much. And my brain is melting here. There's a hero that no retaliation. A hero that stops the enemy from attacking you. That would mean that you would have a tank or some other unit that could attack with a massive, huge attack, and the enemy wouldn't shoot back. And you may find yourself leaning into that unit to solve all your problems. If there's a particular unit that you can't defeat or can't get rid of, you're like, okay, I'll use the double strike tank on that. Oh, there's, some artillery that I can't quite get to. I'll just use the double strike tank to blast a hole in the defense, and then I'll go after it. And you'll find yourself solving all of your problems with your special unit instead of learning generally how to play the game, like as if you were playing a multiplayer game, just that the game is easier for you. So those are my recommendations if you want to make the game easier. It's funny to say, but the actual difficulty options themselves do not decrease the difficulty of the actual combat at all. They make the economy easier. So if your problem was you're running out of prestige, then it does absolve some of that problem. But often the problem of running out of prestige is because you're taking a lot of bad combats, so you're taking a lot of damage, and that damage is having to be repaired, and that's what's costing you money. This selection of traits will allow you to take that damage, take less damage, and therefore pay out less. Will just generally make the game a fair bit easier, probably like 20-30% easier. You make all the same moves and you'll just take a whole lot less damage, and you'll deal more damage while taking less damage. So these are the traits to pick. Okay, so excuse me, what if you want to make the game harder or more fun?
I salute your
Well, I have some challenge runs for you. So we're going to talk about my favourite challenge run, and then we're going to talk about a new feature. So we're going to talk about my favourite challenge runs first. So if you open up the campaign, you will have a, in the advanced options, let's put the difficulty back up to standard. Standard for me. Hardest difficulty. Oh man. Okay. In the special challenges, you have all these special challenges. Now, a lot of them, in my opinion, some of them make the game just objectively harder. Some of them just make the game annoying. But there are a couple that make the game just like a totally different game. And that can be huge fun. So, I'm going to talk about the most fun challenge run that I ever did, which is one with slow reaction. So, first things first, put the combat randomness down to 10%, so you can't, that's where I prefer to have it, but this is to avoid having luck spare you from the damage that is about to unfold. And also to just keep the balance of combat at a sort of flat level. Okay, you can change anything else you want to taste. This is not actually, we're not going to be using any of these. You can use Europe on a shoestring if you are really swimming in prestige, but this challenge run is one that will drain your bank account. So if you are playing a game and you think that, you know, you just have too much money, drowning in money, all the hardest settings and you're drowning in money, this is the challenge run that is going to fix that problem for you, I promise you. So put that on, Europe on a shoestring, but you don't have to. Load up your game and add the trait slow reaction. This one here. Slow reaction. I did a slow reaction challenge run. It just totally changes the way the game plays. Completely changes the way the game plays and will force you to play very, very well. So what slow reaction does is, and you can just pick these traits normally, I promise you it won't help. You can pick whatever you think is best. Killer team, anti-air veteran, whatever. It's not going to help you.
I salute your impeccable timing here, General.
So what slow reaction does is it means that your units will not fight back on the enemy's turn at all. And that totally changes the way that the AI calculates aggression, which causes the AI to come after you quite fiercely. So excuse me. So the only thing that provides you with any defense is your artillery or anti-tank guns. So you're not totally defenseless on the enemy turn. But it will cause slow reaction will cause the enemy to make constant aggressive moves to hit you, and it will totally change how you play the game, because they might make all these aggressive attacks and they will do damage, and then they'll pincer around you to make more aggressive attacks on whatever units they think are soft. So typically, if you set up like a wall like this with your artillery behind it, the AI would not attack you. But with slow reaction on, as you can see, they don't care. They are charging in to deal damage to you. I mean, the artillery is there and it is working, but it's not stopping them from making these ultra aggressive attacks. Look, even the anti-tank gun, which normally never moves, is on the attack. Because in a normal battle, this artillery would deal so much suppression and damage to this anti-tank gun that it really wouldn't get any damage, so it wouldn't attack. But with slow reaction on, the AI can just go for you. It just goes for you. And now you're in a position where your units are damaged. So this unit is damaged, for example, this one's damaged and this is damaged. If you repair it, say you repair these, so obviously they're not attacking on this turn. They're still not defended. So, you know, these guys can continue to attack and attack and attack and attack you and deal more and more and more and more damage to you, and you're not actually in any way stopping the assault. Because without slow reaction, these guys would obviously take retaliatory damage from the unit itself. So they would be being chipped down. You can, in the standard game, you can sort of get into a habit of making a wall and constantly repairing that wall, knowing that the wall is going to damage the aggressors down to a point that you can then counterattack and crush them. On slow reaction, that never happens because your units are not shooting back. Only your artillery is, but the rest of your units are not firing back. So they're not, generally speaking, getting any weaker. So you can see here that it's, you know, I'm still going to take some pretty severe damage here. These guys have pushed in such a way that's made it very, very difficult for me, almost immediately. I promise you, do a slow reaction game, set whatever difficulty settings you like, have, you know, whatever traits you want, but you must include slow reaction, and the way you play the game will totally change. But I wouldn't say it's unfair, but you will learn to correctly choose and set up your artillery, because it's the only thing that offers any protection whatsoever from the unbelievably aggressive assaulting that will happen on slow reaction. Simply because it totally changes the way that the AI calculates threat. The AI will not make suicidal attacks, preferring to do nothing than take an attack that's going to result in a lot of damage to them. But with slow reaction, they are able to attack with all their units all the time and get damage. And trying to mitigate that damage makes for a really unique and flavorful challenge that you can really... I really enjoyed it, personally. So that's my first one. But what if you're after a more historical challenge? I swear, man, this throat is killing me. So, I want to talk about a feature I designed. Woohoo! So added to the game, quietly, is a new feature. And that new feature is limited stock. Now, limited stock is something that I actually came up with. I was talking to, well, actually, Rundecourt, who's the developer of this game, he said, Oh, if you have any ideas for any special features or anything that would make challenge runs more exciting, I don't know if he watches my challenge runs or not, but maybe he does. Then let me know. And I said I had a great idea. What if all of your units were limited, like captured equipment, so you had to manage the amounts? I don't think he was 100% convinced about this at first, but I said, well, here's what makes it very interesting. So let's just skip this because it's you can set this up however you want, but it doesn't really matter for what I want to show.
I salute your impeccable timing here, General.
So you'll see now that all of your units are limited. You will get 20 of each unit at the start of each mission that you could possibly have had. And then on the next mission you'll get 20 more. So the stockpiles will build. But what's really cool about this new feature is that it's a well-known thing with Panzer Corps. Like, why would you bother? I mean, there are reasons to bother, but just bear with me here. Why would you have a sort of historical army where, you know, you have some regulars, some grenadiers, some pioneers, even some cavalry? You know, when most strategy, you know, most people are aware that one of the best strategies is to just change all of your infantry to pioneers and use nothing but engineers. You know, upgrade all of your tanks to whichever tank is the best and ignore all the other tanks. You know, always have the best recon cars, always have the best of everything, you know, and never bother with any of the other models of anything, because in the standard game you can just switch between models without any upgrade costs or anything like that. You can just change stuff around, and there's no reason not to. Now obviously, like right at the start of the game, there isn't a huge amount of choices. But the point is, especially with tanks, you know, once the Panzer IIIJ comes along, for example, why would you bother with any other model of Panzer III? Because the J1 is better than all the other ones, all the other Panzer IIIs. So you upgrade all of your tanks to Panzer IIIJs and you bin all of the previous Panzers, you know, the D and the B and whatever, whichever Panzer IIIs you had. You just bin them all. But in limited deployment, you actually need to think about having a historical composition, because you just can't change your whole army to pioneers. You just can't. If you're only receiving 20 per mission, you know, and obviously the standard squad size is 15, then if you deploy a squad, you've only got to take 5 damage across all of your existing pioneers before you've run out of trained pioneers, and you can't reinforce anymore. So what this does is it forces upon you the need to actually use not the best units, to have a more historical and more spread out army, because you can't just run the latest stuff all the time. Like, you know, if I had Tiger 1s, if I'd, you know, on the next map, the Tiger 1 is in production, so I receive 20 Tiger 1s. Well, if I've got 6 tank divisions, I can't just change all 6 of them to Tiger 1s because I haven't got enough. And honestly, I couldn't change more than 1 division to Tiger 1 because I need to have some spares to reinforce the unit that I changed. Otherwise, if I run 2, you know, if I take my 2 my 20 Tiger 1s and I split them into 2 groups of 10 and upgrade 2 tank regiments to Tiger 1s, there's no spares for them, so I'm not going to be able to reinforce them during the battle. It means that you are actually going to want to use the older equipment when you can, to conserve the better equipment for when you really need it. And that's going to lead to a lot more of a historical composition to your army. Now, there is another challenge run, which I didn't design, but in the menu there was the collector, and what the collector did is it forced you to have only 1 of each kind of unit. But I always felt that that was too forced. That, to me, that just felt quite arbitrary. Oh, you're only allowed one of this, one of this, one of this, one of this, one of this. You're only allowed one of this, one of this, one of... You know, it really, to me, sort of took a lot of the flexibility out of the game. The limited availability feature means that you can actually plan which units to use and when to stockpile other units for battles later. Like, you know that the slog through Russia is coming towards the end of the campaign, and you're going to need a lot of pioneers to clean that city out. So this encourages you to not deploy pioneers early on, just deploy regulars, grenadiers, and maybe even cavalry. Nobody deploys cavalry, but you might want to actually deploy cavalry, because these units, you know, are all inevitably going to take damage and take losses, and you can stockpile your elite troops, your pioneers, so that when Russia comes around, you can change all of your infantry to pioneers, clean out the town, you know, absorb that damage, and then you can change them back after. So there's a long-term planning aspect as well into which units you're going to use and when. Am I going to use all of my, say, Panzer 35s or Panzer 38s like early on and try and avoid attritioning them away? Or maybe I'm going to use some of this cheaper stuff earlier on so that I'm stockpiling these, so that then I can deploy them in large numbers later when I really need them. And for me, it also solves the problem, well, as I explained before, it solves the problem with certain classes of, for example, when you unlock the Messerschmitt, you will be running the Messerschmitt for a long time, and when the Type G comes along, you'll immediately convert all your E's to G, and you'll never use the E's again. Well, now you have to decide which ones you're going to convert and which ones you're not going to convert, because you have a limited, just like historically, you got a limited supply of different types of aircraft, and you're going to have to manage that supply, because otherwise, if you try and run nothing but G's, you're going to run out of G's, you're going to run out of airframes, and then you're going to be forced to use E's. And also for me, in the Grand Campaign, I really would have loved to have had this feature for the whole of a Grand Campaign from the beginning. A little bit too late now. When you receive, you know, special limited prototype units and all that kind of stuff, guess what? They're on a limited stockpile as well, so enjoy them while they last. They are not going to unrealistically stick around forever because you have a seemingly infinite supply of some incredibly obscure vehicle. And this really adds value. There's a hero called Field Repairs that allows you to repair damaged units. Really adds value to that hero and the Field Medic hero that repairs infantry. Because you will be literally fixing your limited stockpile of infantry and vehicles, which is going to affect your long-term strategy. So I hope you guys like this feature. It was something that I thought about a lot, and I submitted it to Run to Court as an idea, as a design, and he didn't say anything. And then, much to my surprise, like a few weeks later, it appeared. It appeared in the game. I'm like, woohoo! You could have told me that you'd implemented it. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And the next section of the Grand Campaign that I do, I am going to be enabling limited supply. I might do some other stuff in addition to limited supply, but I'm going to be enabling limited supply from my own Grand Campaign because I that strongly believe that it really adds something to the game. It's going to really increase the challenge. Now, obviously, there's loads of other stuff in this game to play around with in the special settings. Truly there is, but I just wanted to talk about a couple of things which I think will make the game, will change the game for you, will make the way you play the game totally different, and is going to be really fun. You're going to have a really good time playing with these settings. So that is it. I hope this guide helps someone out there. and we can link this. We'll link this on the forum somewhere, I'm sure, so that people who have the question about how to customize the game can have a detailed explanation of actually how to customize the game. And that is it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time.